Hi all. Welcome to our continued sessions on the interview preparation. So here are the next set of important questions that can be asked from interview as a developer, as an administrator. These are some of the important things that we'll have to know. So let's go into the details of each of these questions. So to start off with, right, they'll ask you to introduce about yourself. So how do you introduce yourself to the interviewers? Like, tell about your name, your education, what's your current background, like, which technology are you working, what's the total experience that you have, what's the relevant experience into the technology that you have, what are the projects that you have worked upon, what are your hobbies. These are some of the things that you can specify to the introduction of this particular process. So it makes sure that like you are telling something about yourself because you're asking like introduction to yourself. So it's better to answer about yourself into the introduction. Now coming to the next set of questions, like if at all we are describing about the projects, so then the next question that can come is what is the most challenging project that you have faced upon? What are the complex challenges that you faced? How did you overcome them? So these are some of the questions. So let's say like, let's take any project. So while working on RPA, what are the complex things that we can face? The selectors not remaining consistent, the applications getting frequently updated, or certain challenges that you might face during the implementation. So you can mention or specify this some of the challenges. Now coming to the interview, they'll ask like, how did you resolve it? So what was that your resolution? Like how did you customize the selectors? What is that you have done? Okay, if applications were frequently getting updated, what is that you have done? Should there be any credentials that were required? It was frequently getting changed. So keeping all this in mind, what is that we have done? So that is about like the most challenging things that we have faced and how did we resolve. So something this is based on your understanding, based on your the challenges that you have faced. It's typically better to answer this particular question. So when what happens is like when you specify something about the project, it is very important that you are able to tell, in reality, what is the project scope, what was the, the benefit, what is that you have done the implementation, what was your role, and then what is that the challenges that you face and how did you resolve. So these are some of the very important aspects that we should be definitely able to answer, for any project related questions that is going to come to us. So, if we are able to justify these answers properly, then it is something like, it shows like, it reflects like what is the effort that we put into the project while working, what is that we are able to, what we say, implement, what is that we are able to, achieve or what is that we learn from our previous experience. So that is what it is going to point, based on all these answers. Next is, what are the different ways that you can map your selectors, and what are the types of wildcards? So selectors, like whenever we point our activities onto the screen, like when we indicate onto the respective window, the selectors are generated. So they are nothing but the HTML attributes for any given process. So now how what are the different types of wildcards that we have in UiPath, and how do we use them in our selectors? So selectors are basically they are the constant part of any process. So they keep on what we say, sometimes based on the application behavior, the value of the selectors can change, but it's not that automatically getting updated into the RPA. So how are you going to make it dynamic? So to make it dynamic, we have two ways. One is like using the wildcard, the other one is using variables. So now that is what is the next set of questions, like how many types of wildcards do we have? How are we going to use them, or how do we customize using the wildcards? So basically there are two types of wildcards in UiPath. So one is asterisk, the other one is a question mark. So asterisk is nothing but like, you're trying to replace multiple characters in any process. So multiple is like you're trying to, what we say, replace multiple values of any particular characters. It can be at the start, it can be at the end, it can be between your strings. Anywhere you can replace a multiple characters. And that is why we have something called star or asterisk to replace the multiple values. Next, we have something called question mark. So question mark will replace a single character value. Single means it is something like a single. If the value is more than single, then your the selectors is still bound to fail because it's trying to only change the particular selected position and see if that is properly working or not. If that doesn't, it is bound to fail. Whereas if you're using asterisk, it can replace multiple characters. So if it is a multiple match, then it will definitely go and do the operation. So very, very important from the interview, they'll definitely ask you like, how did you customize the selectors? What are the two different ways to customize? Okay, if we say wildcards, how many types of wildcards do we have? Okay, how are we going to use these wildcards? So, and what is the purpose of the wildcards? What do they exactly do? So all this we'll have to keep it in mind, while we're doing the operations. Our next very important question is like, how is the selector considered as very reliable? So a reliable is something like, it's very stable. So when do we call it as a reliable? So reliable is nothing but like we are trying to make this particular selector to work in multiple such scenarios. It can be, we're trying to make it reliable, like, using the most dynamic values or using like, the wildcards or using variables. So these are the different ways, like, you can make a selector dynamic. So when you are saying dynamic, right, it means you're trying to make it like to work on multiple things. Okay, for example, I have word ABC, but tomorrow if there is something called ABCD and I want to make it work, then either I can use a any wildcard or I can use a value to be passed directly using variables. So that way my selectors becomes dynamic. So which is very, very important, and that is how we make it reliable. Reliable means, in multiple scenarios, the selectors values keep on changing, maybe, due to application upgrades or, due to the behavior of the applications. But, in many scenarios, we are supposed to make our selectors working, and that is possible when we use reliable selectors. Now, how do you scrap a drop-down list element values? So whenever we have a drop-down, like how is that we're going to do? So there are different ways that we can use, the recording, and we can capture the step as a select operation, or we can do a find element exist activity. So find children activity. So this will find all the list of children items that we have it in our process, and we can basically what we say use that wherever required. Moving ahead, RE framework explanation. Now, this is very, very important. They can ask in a different way. What are the different stages of RE framework? So RE framework is something like we have, the init stage, we have, the get transaction stage, we have process transaction stage, and then we have like the end state. So these many states we have, or this many stages we have. The question can be like, tell me in brief about the stage, or what are the different stages that we have in RE framework, or how is the RE framework going to work? So they can ask you in this way. So you can recall your, explanation that we have gone through for RE framework before I, try to attempt and answer your question. So better, just recall in your mind that, what is RE framework, what are the different stages, and what is the purpose of it before I start answering this question. Okay, so let me answer this question now. So our RE framework, right, is consists of different stages. The initially is the immediately after the start. So after start is just the start of the process. Now the very first stage is the init stage. So init stage is all about like you are initializing your multiple things. Initializing like what? initializing your parameters, your applications, your URLs, your credentials, your default values. So multiple such things that is required, right? We are going to initialize whatever is the default values we are setting. If at all anything is to be nullified, any exceptions, everything we are doing at the start of the process. That is what is initialization step meant for. So after initialization, what is that we do? Once it is initialized, if any value needs to be passed, you pass it to the various processes or various stages, and make sure that what is required throughout your process is stored through arguments and passed wherever required, as a global variable or global, not globally, that wherever you require you can pass it using mapping, okay, of the argument values. So now that is about the init stage, and then we have get transaction stage. So here we're getting the transaction data from the queues. So basically what is that we're going to do is we're going to get the values from our queues, or it can be data tables, or it can be anything. So this particular values that we are going to get, they are in a different what we say, it's sources. So we can get from any source. So that is what is the objective of getting the transaction data. So you are getting the value that you want to process. Basically, is something that I want to process the value. So get transaction data will get your transaction data, and it will keep every details like what is the transaction ID, transaction reference number, transaction value, everything we can split it up, pass it to the next stage. So next is like about the process transaction stage. A very important stage in our journey, like this decides about what is that we want to process, what are the data that we want to do, build any logic, we want to handle exceptions, we want to handle what we say, the different sets of values, the formulas. So everything will come under the process transaction stage. A very important stage where we define the entire process, what is that the process meant for, what is that the process is about to do, okay, what is it the process should do, in case of the event, in case of exception, what to do, okay, a way to throw the exception, way to rethrow, do you want to send a notification to somebody? So all these things can be covered as part of your what is the process transaction stage. Update the appropriate state after the process transaction, using your respective state. So this way your entire process transaction works. And then it will keep on looping till you have the transaction, and post no transaction it will end your process, or it will go to end transaction. So when there are no more transactions found, it will go and end the process. This is about the RE framework explanation that we are supposed to give. Okay, I'll give a 2 minutes time for you to recall whatever I have done so far. All the important things you can glance, you can make a note wherever required before we move ahead. Now moving ahead, and the next set of questions is the basic idea on regex or the regular expression. So regular expressions are nothing but, they are the different ways, of predicting your answers or giving the, the hints to the robots. What is that we are supposed to do? Okay. Now, with your regex, right, usually you can build the regular expressions like what kind of pattern you want, what set of data you want. Accordingly, your process will be able to capture your all the sets of data, and it is able to move ahead, because this is very, very important. The regular expressions helps you to solve lots of problems, okay, which ideally the otherwise the process is not able to solve, or you're not getting a direct solutions, and we can actually do that using what we say, the regular expressions. Then very important, this is something from a database perspective, and very important, like you should also understand like what is the difference between execute query and execute non-query. So now basically whenever we are doing a database operation, what happens is we have different sets of operations to be done. So whenever we are doing a different set of operations, we are categorizing these operations. For example, I can do an insert operation, I can do a select operation, I can do update operation, I can do multiple such operations, right? So whenever we are using an execute query, right? Okay, then we are basically what we say doing a select based operations. We definitely will get a response in the data table, and that is basically the task of execute query. Plain way of doing the operation. Whereas non-query is like you are trying to do some update operation, insert operation, delete operation, and here it will give you the response for the value that is affected. So that is the purpose of using execute query and execute non-query. Moving ahead, orchestrator overview. So what are the things that we have in orchestrator? What is the use of orchestrator? What are the different things that we can do it? So in an orchestrator, first of all, we have something called machines. So machines are the ones that we configure on which machine that we want to execute the robot. So, and then we have something called robot. So your robots are linked to machines. So what will happen is whenever we are running a process, then the robot will identify the machine, identify the exact credentials, and it will do the operations. So nothing but robot are the ones that executes the process, but they are linked to your machines. Post that we have something called packages. Packages are nothing but a list of items that we're collecting, and we are putting into the single structured file. That is what we call it as a package file here. From that package, we are going to create a processes. So processes are basically meant to help for execution. So what are packages we generated? We want to create a process out of this. This process is getting deployed to all the robots, and when we go to the next jobs, we can run this particular processes. Similarly, we have something called triggers. So triggers are nothing but at a specific time interval, I want to run the process, then we can use triggers. And then we have the different sets of options like create assets, so we can create a value that keeps on changing, or the values that are not constant, so we can create that at the asset level. Then we have something called queues in orchestrator. Like queues is like where we can do a real-time monitoring of the data processing, so that is why we use queues. And then we also have something like the tenant is where we can do the entire mapping of the robots, machines at the administrative level, and then we can group our processes or team for at a different folder structure level. So these many things are always very important from an orchestrator perspective. We should know that, and that is what is the next question also. What are triggers? So triggers are like at a specific interval based on my time or based on my items that arrives in my queue, I can trigger my process. So at that interval of time, if the robots are available and if there is a data into my trigger, then I can generate the trigger and execute the particular operation. Very, very important. So these are just some of the things that will come from orchestrator perspective. I'll give a quick 2 minutes to recap the things that we have done, because we have covered entire orchestrator based operations and what are the things that is required, like machines, robots, packages, processes. We have jobs, we have triggers, we have schedules, or we have something called assets, queues, tenants, folder structure, the license. Very, very important aspect of what we say orchestrator perspective. Please recap and before we move ahead. Okay, so moving on to our next set of questions. So use of anchor base. So why is the use of anchor base required? Typically, these anchors are nothing but the relative elements that you are referring, or something that that is stable for us to do the operation. These anchors are nothing but like in our, like for example, when you're showing an address to somebody, you're giving a landmark. It's easy to reference. In case the landmark is not matching, then there is no point of doing the operation. And exactly same goes here. So your anchor is nothing but a relative element or relative attribute that we are trying to indicate to make sure that the operation that we are trying to do is perfectly fine. Then how do we parse a less JSON file? So this is also very important. Like what do you do to a JSON file? Like how do we deserialize? What are the list of activities that is used? And then if you get a data into the XML formats, how do you deserialize? And how do you read the data from an XML? How do you create the structures? And how do you iterate the value and separate it that through the what we say element-based operations? So the next very important is which is the current UiPath version that you're using. So this is something that you should definitely know, from any interview perspective, like which is the current tool version that you're using. And not only the version, but it's also like, what are some of the important features of this particular version? How is it different from the previous version? That is also very, very important. And apart from that, like, what is the most latest version that we have within the market? What are its best features? And, what is that it is different from the version that you're using? Okay, why, all this is important because that shows like, you have a clear understanding, you know the roadmap of the the product that you're trying to use, you're trying to learn something new, you're trying to explore something. So that is very, very important to know for us. Okay, so it's always important that we know what are the different the versions that is available, what are the features, how is it different from its predecessor, okay, how it makes an impact in the current market, are we aligned to the current market requirements, and that is why tools will come up with different set of features and functionalities. So we should definitely be knowing at least from the tool version that we are working and what is that is currently available in the market, the latest version. Okay, then how do you get the queue item? So you can, use a get queue item. So what will happen is like you can get the value either from a reference column, or you can create a separate element values that you can refer within your code to get the values. Next, have you any time tried the OCR based automations? OCR is like nothing but optical character recognition. So have you any time done any OCR based automation? Which tool of the OCR have you used? What are the challenges that you faced? What is that you have to do it within the OCR tool? Or do you have like is it a web based? Is it a cloud based? Like is it something like desktop based application? So something you should know in case you have used it. Which version of that particular OCR engine have you used? How is it different from the other OCR tools that is available in the market? These are the certain things that you'll have to explore if you're keen to answer this particular question. Because it's very, very important that OCR, if we are telling, we are not just telling for the sake of telling, but we know something about it. Okay, like what is the licensing cost? How much what we say data we are able to process on a particular given day, like what is everything that we can process, is there any human intervention required, what are the most complex challenges that you face, how did you overcome that, what are the common industry problems that you have, how do you overcome that. So multiple things will come into mind when you're working about OCR. At least we should know from all this perspective well, looking from OCR based solutions or OCR based responses. Quickly give you a 2 minutes to note down the things before we move ahead.
Okay. So moving ahead to our next set of questions. What if find element doesn't appear on your screen or within that time frame? Or what will happen if it's a timeout? So basically, timeout operation is like it will keep on waiting for that much particular time that is given in that particular timeout property, post which the process will fail. Within that time, if any time the operation, if the timeout what it is specified, and if it's able to find that particular element, then it's going to go on into the operation. So, for example, if I give a timeout of 30 seconds, my process can keep on trying every second. Let's say 24 seconds I got the response. In that case, whenever I get the response, my time will stop. But let's say if nothing comes up in the next 30 seconds also, then actually the process will fail. So it will default wait and keep on trying till that particular interval post which it is bound to fail. Next is very important about how do you do the exception handling. Suppose there is a known or unknown exception that has happened in the process. So how do you handle this? So typically we have something called try catch finally. So try block will try to do the operation that is defined. If any exception happens, known or unknown, it will be caught in the catch block, and from there we can either go to the final block or we can rethrow the error towards the end of the process. So both the ways it is possible, but this is how typically we do the exception. So known or any unknown error, all our design should be part of try catch final block. What are the different log levels that we have in UiPath? So different set of log levels are nothing but like we have trace, we have information, we have error, we have warning, we have fatal. So these are the different levels. And what is the purpose of it? So, or what is the use of it? So like trace is to trace the entire design or code. So we can trace our code or we can trace our design based on the requirement. Information is like we are giving a custom information, like about a process, the end users. That is about information. Warning is notifying the user like something is there. Do you want to take any action or do you want to proceed ahead? So you're just notifying. It's something like not mandatory. You can or you can ignore if you want, or you can attempt it, but something like you can ignore it also if required. So we have something called warning. You are just notifying error means it's something failure, and it's something like could be a data issue, it can be like input issue, the value issue, multiple factors. So like an error is something like that is fixable, but the next is like we get something like fatal. So fatal is like complete breakdown. My application is not responding, my network is down, I don't know what to say that, and the servers are down. So all this comes in the fatal service or the critical services. Okay, so these are some of the different log levels that we have. Next, what do you do if you get something like object reference not sent to instance of object? So here what you have to basically do is check if at all our the properties are not set properly, or have you not provided proper input output parameters, or are you missing something, like is there something wrong? So we'll have to check each and every such basic things before we try to resolve the error. Okay, so next question is like how do you create a library? So like the snippets or the common libraries, how do you create a library projects, and and how do you make that your mandatory arguments, like how do you ensure that the user has to enter the value to this? So you'll have to design accordingly, like if you want to create a library process, you can create a library project and you can use it, or you can create the snippets of the file and you can use it wherever required. Again, like what is a user throw and rethrow? So throw will actually throw the exception from your try block to the catch block, whereas the rethrow will throw your exception message from your catch block to the end of the process. Next, moving ahead, what is the best to use, full or partial selectors? Always partial selectors are like, you are going to have attached windows, so that will help you to speed up your processing, less error prone, and something like easy to manage. Whereas, full selectors are like, they will be generated every sector step by step, but for operation to operation basis. In an event of multiple changes, then your full selectors are always like time consuming. So looking from the process stability, process quick turnaround time, it's always the partial selectors that are very, very helpful. Next is like, can we run an Excel activities in an VDI without an Excel package? We can run Excel if we try to use it as a workbook, but if you want to run it as a pure Excel, then we'll have to install the Office-based products to use the Excel-based operations. But trying to use workbook, then it is not required. So, I'll just give you another quick minute or two to refresh or relax what we have done so far, understand, and before we go to the next set of questions. Okay, moving ahead to our next set of questions. Describe your IT experience and role. So as I said at the beginning, like you will have to tell what was your role, what are your responsibilities, what is it you've done as part of the project, what is it you've done as part, suppose you're from a team lead role background, what is it you've done as a team lead role, or if you're from a administrative background, what is it you've done from administrative roles, if you're from a management background, what is it you have done from a management perspective. What are the different roles, responsibilities? What are the different challenges from the projects, from the perspectives? What is it, how do you communicate to your client? How do you share the feedback? How do you share the progress? So all this is something that, you can tell as part of a project experience or, your IT experience. So it can be just not, only from the project perspective, but overall perspective about your roles, your responsibilities, how do you handle to your client, how do you work as a team member, how is that, you all of them do their each other's task, so it's very, very important. How do you integrate them, how do you test them as a together? So all this makes your particular thing as like your experience. So next, they'll ask you about your project. So this is very, very important. Like, what is that, you have told about your project. Again, ask specific questions to your project, like, what are the applications are involved, what is the volume, okay, how many number of transactions are done, what are the challenges that you faced, how did you resolve them, or how did you overcome your challenges. Very, very important. So you should be knowing many to many details about your project. Like, it can ask it, okay, it was underlying which technology, which platform, which version. Okay, if in this particular technology, this particular version, this is what in the feature we have, what is the purpose of this? Anything can come up. So it's something like, you should be always thoroughly prepared with your questionnaires for the project section. So they can ask you about tool, they can ask you about the different comparison. Is there any payment involved? Is there any third-party APIs involved? Anything related to the things can come up. So it's very, very important. We know about, the different project experience. Next, moving ahead, like, have you worked on PDF-based automation? So it's very, very important, like, we justify, like, okay, if at all we have done on PDF-based automation, how did we do? How did we do the extraction of the value? How did we do the mapping? Okay, what is that we have done for the PDF automation? How many number of fields that we have extracted? Was it a, the PDF file, like, as a fixed template? Was it a, rotational template, like values kept on changing? How did you, manipulate the values? How did you do the operations? So all this can be, part of your PDF based questions. Next is like, have you, what is the run and attended bot in NVIDIA and it's working fine, but when we schedule why the orchestrator, it throws an error or doesn't start, what might be the possible reason? So like, when you're trying to run from your job from the orchestrator, what happens, like your job is going to go to that particular robot will verify your machine credentials, everything has to be verified. So in case your, your accounts is not matching or your credentials are not matching, then also the job cannot run. Sometimes your robot is not working or your services are down. In that case also, you cannot, execute. So there are multiple reasons. So based on the challenges that you face, it could be, based on the infrastructure. It can be something from administrative perspective. It can be from an application perspective, from a server perspective, multiple things. So all these reasons can lead to, what we say, the process is not getting executed. So it's very important that, you check this, when you're implementing, what are the issues that you face, keep a track of it, and remember that, something can be asked similar to that in your interview perspective as well. Next, like, you have multiple, duplicates in instance. How do you remove them? So you have something called remove command to remove the duplicate values, or, you can check using a regular expressions and remove the particular values. So it's all possible. Then again, like, how do you create a stable selector or something, like, how do you make it like, a selector that is being able to work on multiple things? So like, you can customize using your variables, you can use dynamic selectors, so you can use wildcards. So there are multiple ways that you can, what we say, stabilize the selectors. And then what are the attributes to use or not? So like, if at all attributes, like, you let's say have an index value. So index values are bound to change. Any index, any value that is represented by number, it will have to change, check that these values are consistent or they keep on changing. So in that case, we'll have to, make sure that these attributes are updated with the most recent value that is getting passed. Next, how do we add up variables in the selectors? So like, you can create a variable, in the previous versions, it was the variable only of the type string was being accepted. So you create a variable of the type string, go to edit selectors, select the name of the property that you want to pass the value, go and change, the value that you want to pass it using a variable, select the variable, click on OK, and your variable will be passed directly, or the value of the variable being passed into the selectors. So it is absolutely possible. Next, moving ahead, like, how do you add variables in a selector? So okay, we have covered that. Next is the different types of mail activities and difference between them. So like, what are the different types of email activities that you have? can be, SMTP, IMAP, POP3. We have something from Exchange server, we have from email, we have from Outlook, we have from Lotus Notes. So different service provider. Then we have different set of activities like, get the mails, send the mails, get the down, get the attachments, mark them as read, mark them as unread. There are multiple ways that, there are multiple operations that can be done on an, the email based operations. And based on the service provider, like if you're using IBM Lotus Notes, so it's IBM's product and it's very encrypted and secured. Whereas Outlook, the way that we configure is slightly different. Again, it's a secure one, but you don't have to pass your credentials every time that you're using Outlook. Whereas you're using SMTP, we can configure SMTP through our tokens, through our values. So multiple such way it is possible. Next, how do you connect to your database? You can pass it as a string, you can pass it as a string recognizer, and you can pass as a name, and then you can fetch the data. So once your connections are established, you can execute a select query, okay, and then you give the name of the table, give the name of the column, frame the select query, and execute to get the value from your database operations. And after you mark a mail as unread mail, so we have a property to mark the mail as read or unread. So based on our criteria, we can mark the mails as read based on the subject, based on the body line, based on the sender, or based on the receiver. We can make up criteria, and based on the criteria, we can set the value. So I'll give you quickly a minute's break to recall what we have done and before we proceed ahead. So moving to our next set of questions, like how do you run a job on an orchestrator? So like, we'll have to go to the job screen, and then like if you go to tenants, so from a tenant, you can go to the individual folder structures and the folder hierarchy that we belong to, under which we'll go to automations. Under automations, we'll have something called package, process, jobs, triggers. So we'll go to, the job section. So we'll have to, pick up the job that process name from there. We'll have to, simply pick up the priority with which we want to execute the job. And then, we'll have to select like which robot is going to execute this and like how many times that we want to run this. And then, we can click on submit. So this is how we can, create and execute a job. Now details about queue, like and how does it work and what are the statuses. So like in queue is something like we can add the items to that. So when we add the items, the status is new. So once the items are added, what we say, the robots will keep on picking the items with the status new. The multiple robots, the moment they pick, it becomes in process, and it will keep on processing our operations. So once we process, if the transaction is successful, it will go to success status. In case it is failed, it will go to the failed status. So this way, the different, like, the basic status we have. Like suppose I'm trying to delete the transaction, then I will have a delete status. If I'm, keeping the transactions, on hold for 24 hours, it become abandoned. So like, suppose I have retried my particular transaction, then the status will be retried. The retried number will be given there. So this way, there are multiple ways that I can check, what is that I can do it. So, there are different ways that I can have the different sets of statuses for my particular transactions. And so how it works, so like, as I said, like a robots will basically pick the items, process it, update the particular status, whatever it may be, success, fail. If it's fail, it will tell you whether it's a business exception or a system exception. It will take this particular value, it will update, and then once that is done, what it will do is it will go and go to the next set of transactions. It will keep on executing till the last set of values found. Also for each and every particular value, it will have a log information, what is it the robot is doing, how many transactions are pending, how many are yet to be picked up, or how many success, how many failed. So this will give you a realistic data count. So that is about the queues, and basically queues are used to in your last set of volume of data to process, and we want a real-time monitoring, but within a single execution, then it's the queue is the best operation. What if your transaction fails? So as I just said, like if a transaction fails, you mark it as a fail and update whether it's a business exception, it's a system exception, update the respective transaction information, and then you either if you want to retry, we can retry, or we can go to the next set of transactions. So we mark it as a failed with a set of business or system exception, and then we go to the next set of transaction. If you want to retry, we can even retry. And what are the different types of assets that we have? So assets are basically like, we have something of text type. The text type of the assets will be having, any value it can set, keep it in the memory. It's a text. If it's a Boolean, it can keep true or false. If it's integer, it can keep numbers. And if it is credentials, it can keep usernames and passwords. So throw and rethrow, as I said, okay, throw is used everywhere in your try block. If you're trying any operations, you want to throw either custom exceptions or known exceptions, you can throw. So once the error is thrown, it will go to the catch exception, where it will catch all the exceptions and errors. From there, either I can go to the final block, or if I rethrow the error, it will go towards the end of the process. Then, as just we discussed about the try catch final block, so try is basically meant to try the operations. Catch is basically meant to catch the exceptions. And either I want to throw the exceptions from a catch to the end of the process, or I don't want, so I can decide on both. And then we have something called final blocks. In case of event of failure, you still have something to do. Then what is that to be done? So that is what we do finally. These are some of the very important set of interview questions that will be definitely asked from the interview perspective. Please prepare on this, and note down the things, try to recall, try to, answer these questions on your own before without seeing anything. And then you still don't remember or you're unable to recall. It's best that, to refer the sessions to, make sure that you're perfectly all right. So that's it on this particular session of, interview preparation. Thank you so much for your time.